Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker and what it takes to complete a trail section by section. I'm really looking forward to talking to our guest we have on the podcast today because he is our first Pacific Crest Trail section hiker. Patrick Murphy, aka Bacon, started off his quest of the Pacific Crest Trail as a thru-hike attempt in 2017, and about halfway up the trail realized he would not finish the trail that year. We will talk with Patrick about what happened and his goals going forward. Patrick and I hit it off right away as if we were out on the trail together, having a conversation and putting in miles and enjoying the views. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Patrick. Welcome to the podcast, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I am really excited because, like I said, you are our first Pacific Crest Trail section hiker on the podcast, and look forward to hearing about what's going on out there on the Pacific Crest Trail. And I want to start off our conversation. We'll just get right into it about your quest to thru-hike the Pacific Crest Trail by having you give us a little bit of background on you when you first heard about the PCT and what made you decide to attempt a thru-hike, Patrick.
You know, somewhere around in the mid-90s, 95, 96, something like that, I saw an article in a local paper in San Diego about this hike that went from the border at Campo up to Canada, and they had some pictures of some hikers, and I thought, how cool of a hike would that be? And not having a conceptualization of time, I thought to myself, well, it says 2,600 plus miles, maybe 2-3 weeks, I can handle that, you know, and not realizing how far you go each day and all that. And now I realize it is a 4 to 5 month commitment. So I decided to, I put that down and I said, well, I'll wait till I retire. And I retired 3 years ago, in which 2017, I decided to start my quest on the Pacific Crest Trail. I knew some people that had done some section hiking and things like that and talked about it. And I was hiking with a group of guys that were doing a variety of different trails and summits and things like that. And so I knew that was going to be my goal once I did retire.
Well, cool. First of all, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
And second of all, so cool that you live in the San Diego area. Being here on the East Coast, it's like, you know, we all dream of being in a perfect weather place, and San Diego seems to be where it's at. So because you live in San Diego and you decided, all right, I've retired, I'm going to do it, I'm going to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. You first went out with some buddies of yours and wanted to kind of, you know, start hiking, getting your trail legs, those kind of things. So talk to us about some of your pre-hikes you did and where you went.
Yeah, through my work, I ended up having a bunch of friends that were kind of mountain summit guys. We did, they go, hey, come along with us. So I went to REI and bought, I think it was like $2,400 worth of gear, which was eye-opening.
Wait a minute, Patrick. Okay, now people have talked about their gear, $2,400.
I essentially started off with nothing. I mean, I had camping gear from, you know, when I was younger, little, with my dad, tents, Coleman stoves, things like that. I had nothing that had to do with actual going out and hiking and camping where you're taking everything you have onto a backpack. And so this was new to me. So one of the guys went with me, and we went down there, and I said, let's just do it. So I went and got the right boots. I got the right backpack. I got the right tent, sleeping bag, pants, everything. And so, yeah, I did it right.
You did it right. So what was your first mountain? Now, I know where you are. You're not that far. And I know we talked about like Mount Laguna, Mount Whitney. Still my bucket list to go up Mount Whitney, like Mount Baldy. Talk to us about a little bit about those peaks and what was your interest in doing that?
Well, the first one was San Gorgonio. It's 11,400, something like that. I think it's the tallest peak in Southern California. And so a group of us went up there and did it, and I had a blast. I mean, it was addicting. We went in the fall, so it was quite cold, but again, I had the right gear. And
you had $2,400 worth of gear. I'm not going to let you forget that, okay?
I had $2,400 for the jackets and pants and everything else. So yes, so I was prepared. The guys were prepared. And we went up, and I just realized that I was, handling the altitude elevation gain, and some of these guys they had hiked quite a bit, and so I kept looking back, how come nobody's keeping up with me? Not that I'm any kind of great athlete or anything. I just thought that maybe I just had lucked out. I'd been in a better shape than they were at the time. So,
and your body adjusted to that's one of the things on the East Coast that we don't really have to worry about is actually adjusting to altitude, and it sounds like. I mean, I don't know what the altitude in San Diego is, but it sounds like you didn't have any problems going above 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet.
Yeah, we have the local mountains, Mount Laguna. I think that runs about 6,000, 7,000 feet at the highest. So you can get up in there, and the Pacific Crest Trail does run through there. So I got to kind of some exposure to it in hiking up in there, some of the local mountains. There was also Mount Baldy is in the Southern California area, as well as which is also San Antonio, Mount Baden-Powell, things like that, San Jacinto. So those are areas I was able to kind of get kind of into the whole hiking thing, carrying weight on my backpack, food items, sometimes spending the night, sometimes not.
Nice, very good. And I know I'm very jealous you've gone up Whitney as well.
Yes, in 2014, that the group of guys after Gorgonio, we said, hey, it's essentially the same group. We decided let's do Whitney, so we researched it. None of us had been up there. None of us had been up to 14,500. We heard horror stories about bloody noses and you got to turn around, right. You're going to die, and all this kind of thing. And so we did it. We did our research. We got our permits, which were pretty difficult. And then we ended up going
That's
up.
What I've heard. That
yes.
Yeah. Did you guys get day hiker permits to go up there? Or?
No, we did the overnight, and we stayed at the I can't remember. It's a trail camp. I think it's the highest camp up there before there's 99 switchbacks they call it. And,
oh my goodness!
Yes, it's quite an uphill thing. It's 14. I think it's 14.5, something like that. Is Mount Whitney. So yeah, it was the essentially the second big hike that we had done, overnight hike that we had done, and we did good. Everybody made it through. It was a good time.
Very good. Perfect. So you get those hikes under your belt, and before we go any further, since we're talking about the Pacific Crest Trail, and I am just like enamored by this Pacific Crest Trail now, kind of break it up for us so the listeners kind of get a good visual of what we're talking about. We know the Pacific Crest Trail. Obviously, it's on the West Coast. It starts in California and goes through Oregon and then into Washington. Kind of break the segments down for us, starting at the beginning there.
Well, it goes from Campo, California, which is at the border, right at the border. The sign, the actual southern terminus symbol is right there. And there's a road, that dirt road between the border fence and the actual southern terminus. So you start there and go northbound to Canada. It's broken up into sections, and I don't know where this came from. I know that I've read different maps, but it has sections from A to R for California, and then Oregon and Washington is A to L. So you'll see people on Facebook or wherever, social media, talking about, I did section I of Washington. And so you kind of, that's, and the maps I have that I've used have made it kind of easy to kind of show you where there are large highways or towns or whatever you can get off, maybe get resupply, or if you need to get off the trail and get to like a major city or something like that.
Perfect. And I know that from here on the East Coast, you always hear, you start in the desert and then you get to the Sierra and then it's more like Northern California. Then you have Oregon, kind of seems to be its own like conglomerate, and then you have Washington, and then it's also broken down, like you said, A through R, I think, or
yes,
and then then it starts over. What's the next? So A through R, and then what was the next segment?
And then the Oregon section, it starts Oregon and Washington is A through L. So if you say I hike section B of Oregon, then they'll know they've combined Washington and Oregon together to be that separate alphabet. And I don't know where it came from. You'll see people on social media talking about, I did section such and such, the Sierras and or whatever, and that way you can kind of know if you look at, depending on what map you're looking at. And so it kind of tells you how far each section is. It just helps also, they tend to have the end of the section on some major highway or thoroughfare or town where you can get off and have that, okay, I finished that section, now I'm going to move on to the next one or get off or whatever you want to do.
Oh, that's really good information. And that's good that the sections kind of ended a road too, in case you wanted to leave a car parked there and kind of hike south or north or wherever you were going. So perfect. Thank you for that. So let's get back to, basically, you started your hike on the Pacific Crest Trail in what I would consider a traditional way by going down to Campo, which, like you stated before, is a small town. It's on the California-Mexico border. Is that correct?
Campo is a little north of there. I think if you were to walk from Campo, I don't think there's a bus that goes down to. They get buses. I've done some trail angeling down here in San Diego, so I'll pick people up in downtown San Diego and drive them out there. I think it's about 45 miles east of San Diego is the actual the terminus.
Okay, so you started in Campo, and then you said, hey, I'm going to hike north. And your start date was pretty traditional too. It seems from the research that I've done and from you and I talking before that right around, 1st of April, you started on April 15th.
Yes.
So just kind of start talking through your hike with us. So you started at Campo, April 15th. Tell us how that beginning, and you started in the desert section, just so everybody knows. So how was it? How did things go in the start, and kind of walk us through?
Well, that winter, the winter before that was quite heavy. So there was plenty of water sources coming out of Campo. It is, like you said, kind of desert shrubbery, some ups and downs, but for the most part, until you get to where you're going to go up Mount Laguna, it's relatively flat. And then there's plenty of water, at least for me at that time, which is always important. I had enough water. Once you get up into Mount Laguna, there's a small town there, and they have some resupply information, resupply stuff, and different places to go, different places to eat.
So is Mount Laguna like your first town that you would encounter once you start there?
Pretty much. I mean, you're going to have, short of Campo, because you kind of run through Campo as you leave the border, which is only a couple miles in, so you're not going to need any resupply there. But Mount Laguna is about 45 miles up from the border. So by this time you've come up into Mount Laguna, which is quite a elevation gain. So and you don't have your trail legs yet with your big backpack. And I remember going southbound
with
one
your
time.
$2,400 worth of gear.
$2,400 worth of gear. And these people were coming up this hill, and you could just see it. And I go, that's how I felt. I mean, it's a tough up because it is just up. And that's the first big one where you kind of go, wow. And I think that's the time where people make that decision, yes or no, do I want to do this or not? Because it's a tough one.
Now, did you pre-plan anything? Did you say, hey, I'm just going to buy my resupply in town? Did you send yourself boxes? What were you doing as far as that aspect?
Well, I was fortunate. My cousin lives out near Scissors Crossing, and then my sister lives in Big Bear. So my sister was going to be my postal person, helping me ship stuff to and from different locations, which I had never done that before, any of that kind of stuff before. So yeah, my cousin picked me up at Scissors Crossing, got a shower, got a good meal, I had some supplies already there, kind of did, that was only after 4 days, so I didn't need too much.
Right.
And then you go up through Warner Springs. Again, you're hitting kind of the Anza Borrego Desert, so it is dry, but it was early enough to where there were water sources for me. As the season goes on, those water sources tend to dry up, so you depend more on the caches, the trail angels or different people that will drop off gallons and gallons of water for everybody, which is amazing. I mean, for the desert, for those people that do that, it's amazing.
Yeah, so talk us a little bit about those water caches. Are those kind of preset, or is it literally, like you said, just trail angels coming out and making sure those are taken care of? How are they determining, how much they're going to put out based on how many hikers they think they're going to put out there?
My understanding is there are some of the people that are true trail angels that are helping put the water out there in certain spots. Some of those are located on gut hooks or whatever.
Okay.
One of those rules is you don't depend on it, though. You try not to depend on it because sometimes they're not full. You'll get there and the angel is gone on vacation and they'll say, hey, there's not going to be water here. Be careful. So they try and keep social media updated on it. And I think there's a few water sources out there that are kept up by the Department of, like the state. They kind of pay for people to put it out there. So I'm not sure which ones are which. I wasn't, sometimes when I needed water, I didn't look at gift horse to the mouth. I was just thankful that the water was there.
So what do you think the furthest you went in between a water carry? Did you have to go? Because I've heard stories, in the desert there on the PCT that, you might have to go 20, 25 miles before you get water. So what was your longest carry?
I would say the desert, actually not even through that part. I would say the desert, Mojave, when you're coming out of the Angeles National Forest to go up towards Tehachapi and then up into the Sierras. There's a section there. It's probably 25 miles where there's no water. So you're carrying, I carried 5 liters. And then there was finally found some kind of a stream coming out of a industrial building there, which was great because it is a little place for people to camp, and it's almost like a little shelter they have there for the hikers. But yeah, it's quite a haul through the desert. It's flat, so you're not getting the elevation gain to wear you out. But if it's in the middle of the heat wave or something like that, for me, I had overcast. It was pretty easy, but I could see somebody having to carry more water if it was warm out because it gets hot in Mojave.
Yeah, and 5 liters, that's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot of extra weight. Yeah. So interesting. So your first point that you really got to, so now I'm going to take the listeners up the trail a little bit. And the first point you got off the trail was 700 miles north of Campo in a place called Kennedy Meadows. So is your mind frame at this time, hey, I'm still through hiking the trail, what's happening, what's going on? So talk us through why you got off the trail, and did you still have intentions to continue on with the thru hike?
Yes, the group I was hiking with, good people. They're all different countries in Europe, but good people. We ended up saying, okay, we're going to go for it. But then we started hearing these stories about Sierra Nevada mountains that 2017 was a very heavy snowfall year. I'm not a mountaineer. I'm a hiker. And I was expecting there to be some snow, but we kept hearing these stories that, it was knee-deep snow through the Sierras. And as we were getting closer, okay, it's going to melt. So some of the people in our group would be like, well, let's hike slower so it'll melt. And I'm thinking, well, is it going to melt by the time we get there? I'm going to just kind of keep going. So we kind of all kept going, and we all ended up making it to this place called Kennedy Meadows. And I had finally got cell service prior to that, and we had a death in the family. So there was a funeral that I had to go attend to. So my sister says, hey, I will pick you up in Kennedy Meadows. So I think it's about mile 702 up on the PCT.
Okay. Now, does Kennedy Meadows, that officially finishes the desert portion of the PCT? Roughly? I
mean, you're kind of going to hit some mountains, but they're not like the big, like, I guess it would be kind of the lower Sierra Nevadas is what
okay.
It would be. It does have some resupply there. There's a general store, a restaurant. It's kind of this famous place where everybody kind of starts. It's like the big place. Once you get to there, you're kind of the gateway to the Sierras. So I got off there. I got picked up, and I got off for 11 days. I had met the group that I was hiking with. We all agreed, hey, let's just get off and let some snow melt. And we agreed 11 days, and we were going to meet in Belden. We got everybody's phone numbers and things like that. And there's a town called Belden north of Sierra Nevadas. It's farther up. South of Mount Lassen, I guess, is the best place I could identify where it's at. So I got off the trail there and again got back on. I actually got on a little bit early because I wanted to get back on at Kennedy Meadows, and there was that section because I was hearing that the snow between Kennedy Meadows and what's called Horseshoe Meadow up near Mount Whitney, I heard that part of it wasn't too bad. So I figured I think it was only about 45 miles. So a buddy of mine dropped me off back at Kennedy Meadows, and I hiked that little section, which was actually very scenic. I'm glad I did it, and there wasn't a lot of snow. So I got off at Horseshoe Meadows, and then I ended up busing all the way to Belden, which was a whole other story. But so I ended up hooking up with the guys, but I was able to complete a little bit more because I thought that time off was a lot, and I didn't want to lose my, because I was feeling good. I mean, we were hoofing.
Right. You had your trail legs.
No, we were ready to go.
Yeah. So at this point, so you've got 702 miles under your feet and on your trail legs, so to speak, and you get off in Kennedy Meadows, and unfortunately, you had to go home for a funeral. And then you come back, you and your hiking group decide, hey, yes, we're going to take 11 days off. We're going to kind of see what happens with the snow. And then you come back and you do another 45 miles north from Kennedy Meadows. And then you take, you get off there, and then you get your ride, and you're going to meet up with your buddies again. And I think this leads us to a point in your and I's original conversation where you stated that 2017 started to be known as the year of fire and ice out on the Pacific Crest Trail. So explain what you meant by that to the listeners and what this actually meant for your hike that year.
Well, like I said, the snow was quite heavy, and I hadn't had that experience before, but we'd heard these stories about there was so much snow, and again, I didn't have the appropriate gear. I didn't have crampons or anything like that. I didn't have an ice axe. So while I was gone on that time off, I did buy micro spikes and an ice axe, thinking we were going to at least hit some snow up in the Lassen area. So when I got back on at Belden, I knew that there was going to be some snow, but I thought it was going to be doable. We'd all done our research. We've been texting during that time off and said, hey, let's just go for it. And then when we got back on at Belden, one of the guys had some experience doing it. So we actually found a nice side of a mountain where we could practice some using the ice axe and things like that. And then I got to use the micro spikes, which weren't difficult to use. I'd never used them before, but I could see how they're used, and they were helpful as far as keeping our footing and that kind of thing. So that was my first experience with that. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds. I've never used an ice axe before, and I know that it is. You got to learn how to catch yourself. Yes. You got to learn how to put the ice axe down, and there's this whole thing like if somebody else is falling. So that's just a whole nother, a whole nother level of hiking that I've never had to deal with. So now you're learning how to do that, and I think at this point, you kind of start seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak, and you kind of made the decision to go home until the snow melts. So talk to us about your decision to go home and what your feelings were and things that were happening, and you kind of realized you were not going to be a thru hiker, and then now you were a section hiker. So talk us through what's happening, what's going on in your mind.
Well, I wanted to finish as much as I could. I kind of realized, like, even as I got up, as we continued hiking northbound, we got to Dunsmuir. Then we found out that the whole area above Mount Etna, which is a whole nother area that kind of loops, if you're looking at a Pacific Crest Trail map, kind of loops out towards the Pacific Ocean, then comes back up into Oregon. That whole section was covered in snow. So I ended up jumping up into Oregon and doing that. It's Section B. It's the second section into Oregon, and that goes up to just south of Crater Lake, which we were hearing that there was a lot of snow up there as well. So
wow.
I just said, you know what, this is, and they were saying there's snow everywhere. So we're getting up, we're talking late May at this point, and it's still a lot of snow pretty much everywhere. I think everybody was kind of flip-flopping, trying to find where they can get on and hit snow. And I just said, well, I'm going to go home. My girlfriend's like, just get off the trail. We know that the Sierras are very dangerous. I think by this point we had, I think there was people missing in the Sierras, which there ended up being a couple of fatalities in the Sierras due to river crossings. So wow. She was very concerned. I said, okay, I'll get off. And then I kind of realized, I'm looking at the time that I have left to do this and the amount of miles I had left. And so she was supportive. Once the snow had melted in July and August and things like that, I ended up jumping back and doing little sections, filling in some of those areas up by Lake Tahoe and things like that were very scenic. And I'm glad I got to see them without the snow, because that area is beautiful. The Echo Lake area, Desolation Wilderness, beautiful.
Right. It's like you don't want to have to struggle to go through these gorgeous areas. Like, it's like you want to enjoy what's out there. And one of the things that you said to me when you went home is that you bought a map of the Pacific Crest Trail and you just kept looking at it.
Yes.
So after 2017, now you're a section hiker, and the year of Fire and Ice 2017, like it just happened. And I think going out on the Pacific Crest Trail, from what I'm learning, is you kind of have to know in your mind, hey, this might happen. Because from what I'm learning is if it's a low snow year, then you're going to have a high fire year. And if you have a low fire year, it could be a high snow year. So talk about that transition from, okay, I'm not going to finish as a thru hiker, but now I'm a section hiker.
Yeah, it was, some of my friends were like being very supportive. Some of my friends would be saying, hey, I'm looking at the Sierras, a lot of snow up there. I don't know. And so I would kind of go, I kind of realized, I just don't think it's going to happen this year. I talked to some of my friends, we bounced it around, and I was like, you know what, I think I'm not going to be able to finish it. But my plan was to never say, okay, if I don't finish it this year, then I'm going to go back and start all over and do it all over again. I just had to transition. It's a mental transition from being the thru hiker to the section hiker. And you read different things that people think that they're, section hikers aren't as good as thru hikers. It didn't matter to me. I didn't want to finish it. I thought it was going to be a 1 year or one season thing. But the idea that it would take me longer, I kind of started thinking about it, and I embraced it because it's kind of cool. It's a cool thing to be a part of. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I don't foresee myself in 10 years going, I'm going to go ahead and try and do it again. So it's one of those things where I'm glad it's not all over at this time. I'm not going to go through that. So what I ended up doing, and by this time, even by the fall, we're trying to hike in Northern California and in Oregon. Oregon's on fire. So now this fire and ice comes in. Everything's burning. Like 200 or 300 miles of the trail in Oregon was burnt.
Wow.
So I don't know how many people actually could say that year that they hiked the entire PCT. My thought was, well, I'm going to do it when it's all open, and I can say I could hike, pretty much every foot of the PCT. So that year I know that they had opened, or they had said, okay, kind of an unofficial part of the PCT will be the Oregon Coast Trail because of that large swath of Oregon that was closed due to the fires. So yeah, I had embraced this isn't going to be the year. So I decided, okay, I'm going to focus on what can I do to get this thing going again next year, meaning 2018. I did buy a very nice map at a local gear outfitter. I put a frame on it. And I'll tell you what, the thing was on my wall, and I kept going, okay, when am I getting, and I'd be daydreaming just looking. I mean, I could look at it and anybody else that's got those maps, and I'm a map guy, so I like to kind of visually see where I'm going. And so I remember just every day I'd wake up and look at it, and then I'd have an idea, and I'd get up and get a flashlight and look at it so I could see it's very detailed. I just wanted to see.
You got out some of that gear that you bought and said, hey, I might as well use this, right?
Exactly. so and then you learn more even about that. You learn gear. You want to get lighter gear, or you want to get better shoes, or you don't need this. And you kind of, I think they call it shakedown, where you shake down your gear. You learn. And I did it in 2017, but so my plan was, okay, 2018 I'm going to go with a plan. There's not going to be as much snow. I'm going to start when there's not as much snow.
And then now that you can choose now what you want to do. I mean, you've got the parts that you've finished. You no longer have to go in a straight line. If the weather's good in Oregon, you go to Oregon. If the weather's good in Washington, you go to Washington. Precisely. Yeah, I ended up, my plan was Sierras in July, and again, it was a lower snow year than 2017, 2018. So my plan was, I'm going to do the Sierras in one thing from Horseshoe Meadows up to Agnew Meadows up in Mammoth, Agnew Meadows by Mammoth. So that would essentially fill that big block in that I hadn't done. And so that was 2018, right?
2018.
Okay.
Then I also ended up doing that other section that goes from Dunsmuir to that first section of Oregon. So I filled in that area that the year before that the snow hit. So by 2018, I had finished all of California. So I was very happy about that.
And California is long, so that is a major accomplishment. So this year in 2019, what did you chunk off this year? 2019, I chunked off Oregon. My plan was initially wanted to do Oregon and Washington, but I wanted to do them separate. And so I ended up doing Oregon in one hike. It was 390 miles, 383 miles, something like that. And so I did from essentially it's Highway 140, which is south of Crater Lake, up to Cascade Locks, Bridge of Gods, and got off there. And I flew home and I said, well, maybe I'll just. The problem with the PCT, and I don't know how the people get all the way through doing it in one
time. That's essentially 4 to 5 months of their life. There's family commitments,
right.
Family illnesses. There's business commitments that I have. So it's like, it is tough to kind of just go and try and do everything off of a cell phone and getting or a computer at a hotel or something like that. And I've got a list of all the email passwords and different things, passwords in my backpack that I need. So it was trying to do business out there. Trying to do business out there is tough when you're trying to stay connected. And some of the areas, quite frankly, in Oregon were tough. I mean, there was areas where we didn't have service for a few days at a time.
So basically 2017 started in the desert, and then the fire and ice, and then you made the decision to get off the trail. You're A-okay with being a section hiker. Now you can go out and say, hey, I can chunk these areas off. And you've done tremendously well, because now you have from the Bridge of the Gods, which is the Oregon-Washington border. Is that correct?
Yes. Is the bridge that kind of goes over I'm not sure I can't remember the name of the river. Darn, it escapes me at this moment. But
that's
the bridge
okay.
that goes
so
over.
I just have visual, because I've seen pictures of the bridge and I'm very jealous because I want to go there one day. So you have from the Bridge of the Gods, which is very popular, to Canada. And how many miles is that you have left?
I have 407 miles. I ended up, after I got to the Bridge of Gods, I decided, I kind of had, I'll tell you what, like I said, that map, I keep looking at it. It calls you, the trail calls you. And I ended up having some time in early September, and I go, I think I can squeeze out one more section. So I kind of looked at my topo maps and kind of said, okay, what's one that I can hammer out and in and out in a week, where I'm flight time, the day of flying back. And I did see it, the section that's goes from White's Pass to Squalamy Pass, section I of Washington.
Okay.
And I ended up doing that one. So I think it was 98, 99 miles, something like that. But it looked doable. And so I ended up, my buddy dropped me off up at White's Pass, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere up there. It's in it's in the Cascades. You're just south of Mount Rainier. And so,
my goodness!
Yeah, and so you end up starting at White's Pass, and you actually go into Mount Rainier National Park. I think it goes through there for probably 30, 40 miles, and then you go out and you get off up at Squalamy Pass.
After spending 10 days last summer, I went on the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. I mean, I could move there tonight. That's how
beautiful.
Gorgeous it is. It's just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I thought we would have a little fun before I let you go here. So first of all, just to recap what we just said. So basically, you've got right around 400 miles left, and we're going to have you back on after you finish, because we want to hear how all that goes down this summer. I thought we would have some fun here with some true and false questions, just some things that we hear on the East Coast about the Pacific Crest Trail. So you ready, Patrick?
I'm good to go. Let's go.
All right, true or false? Everyone on the PCT wears a Hawaiian shirt.
False. No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I'm just saying, that's just kind of some rumors that we hear.
You know what they wear? Gosh, it seems like they wear, a lot of the people wear these, it's like a long sleeve, it's like a hiking shirt, I call it. I guess they would, you'd see some of those movies, archaeologist movies, where they wear those with their sleeves rolled up with a collar. They're like those, but they'll be like plaid prints and things like that.
Okay.
And I have a couple of them, and they, and they're comfortable. They protect you from the sun, maybe keep you a little bit warmer. But yeah, if you're just hiking on the trail and having a good day, that's all you kind of need for the day.
I need that picture of you in your Hawaiian shirt. Okay?
Yeah, I'll see if I've got one somewhere in the back there.
Okay. All right, true or false? There are rattlesnakes everywhere.
I only saw rattlesnakes pretty much in California. I can't remember seeing any in Oregon or Washington. All over California except for the Sierra Nevadas, Southern California, Northern California. They're all over California. I probably saw a dozen, I guess, while I was on the actual trail. Okay,
so that's kind of 50-50, true or false.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see any in Oregon and Washington, but I'd say they're all over California. And like in the Sierras, maybe it's at least when I went through, it was wet still, but it wasn't snowy. And maybe the snow keeps them back, or the wetness, I don't know. But when it's dry,
so I'm going with true.
Okay, they're everywhere. Okay.
All right, true or false? There is absolutely no water in the desert.
There's some springs like we talked about before. There, and you got to know where they're at. You got to trust your gut hooks, the people that update gut hooks for those that have that. They're usually pretty accurate. They'll tell you. They tell how many liters per minute are coming out of the spring, or if a water cache is updated. And that's the only two sources of water you're going to get unless you get to a town. Like I said, sometimes you run into 20, 25 miles without water, but there's some water there.
There's some, okay, so we'll say that one's false. You just got to, look at your gut hooks and listen and see what's going on around you. So true or false? No one ever makes it through the Sierra.
Well, I made it through, and if I can make it through, anybody can make it through. Now, it depends on the time of year. I see these people powering through when there's a bunch of snow, and you can just see they just said it was 3 weeks of their life. That's 21 days. It took me 9 days to get through from Horseshoe to Agnew Meadows when there was no snow or very little snow.
Gotcha.
So if it takes you 3 weeks, that just sounds like too much of a grind. But those people made it through even under the worst of conditions.
So that one's definitely a false.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Last one. True or false? If you don't get to the Bridge of the Gods on the Oregon-Washington border by September, you won't make it to Canada.
September is late, but I saw on social media there were people, and the snow kind of started early. I think late September, early October. But I did see some people hitting the northern terminus into late October. So they did it. I mean, I guess, that would be a long haul. But if they've got your trail legs and you're doing 30, 35 miles a day, I'd say it's doable.
Okay, so we'll go with false depending on the year, the weather, and your trail legs.
Exactly.
All right, perfect. All right, now we've come to the point in the podcast where the guest is going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us to keep hiking section by section.
Cool. Well, Julie, I'm going to read from my journal at the end of my 2018 section hike, kind of after everything was kind of in my mind as far as dealing with the different reasons to get off and on trail. I knew hiking the PCT was going to put me well outside my comfort zone, doing a lot of things that were new to me. It became a journey of firsts for me. First time hitchhiking, first time hiking 30 miles a day, first time no shower for 9 days, first time hiking the Sierra Nevadas. That was just to name a few. It became an adventure of excitement and relaxation at the same time. Awesome, with an exclamation point I wrote. So that must have been at that time I was having a blast, even though I was dirty and stinky after 9 days. I'd like to sign off with, make sure you hike your own hike. I don't know where that came from, but I have embraced that. Hiking your own hike is very important. Take suggestions from the group of people that are around you, your friends that you're hiking with or whatever, but weigh them. Do what you are comfortable with and experience it doing. If you're not experienced at hiking with crampons and ice axes, and you're going to be walking along precipices that you could end up dying, or going over river crossings during a high snow year or where the snow is melting fast, unless you've done all that kind of stuff, unless you're with a group of people that knows how to do it and can help you with it, just hike your own hike. So there's no rush. And that's the thing. If you got to do it in 2 years, 3 years, for me, hopefully 4 years, be safe out there, be wise, and have fun. It is an amazing adventure.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Patrick, for joining us on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you about your section hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. 2017 may have been the year of fire and ice for you, but I think you won in the end with being able to hike all those beautiful areas without the snow and when you wanted. I'm also glad I'm not the only one who has a map of their favorite trail and continues to dream about their hikes. Next up, we have Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kammeyer as we continue our talks about gear and answer your questions. Welcome back to Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kammeyer. On this episode, we are going to have a little chat about different stove and cooking systems for backpacking. We will also begin our Q&A segment as we start to have Steve answer some of our listeners' submitted questions. Welcome back to the podcast, Steve.
Hey, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Really appreciate you coming back and being with us. So let's get right into it. Give our listeners some options when it comes to different cooking systems and why one might choose one over the other when it comes to backpacking. I know that there are several types, some heavier options, some lighter options, and the different fuels. So let's just get right to it, Steve.
Sure. Here we go. Yeah, this is always a very difficult topic for a lot of folks. I think really, first of all, it depends on how many people you're actually cooking for and what types of food you will be cooking. Believe it or not, I know people that carry big cast iron pans out into the wilderness, and they're making all kinds of crazy stuff out there. But
well, that is true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so that's obviously not something you want to go backpacking with. But on the other hand, if you're going backpacking with a group of 3 or 4 people and you're out for a good amount of time, there's really no sense in carrying 3 or 4 stoves with you. Every person does not have to have their own stove. One person can be dedicated to carry that and do all of the cooking. But of course, if you're going to be doing it, cooking for 3 or 4 people, you're going to want to carry something a little heavier, like maybe a Jetboil or the MSR stoves, the big, huge canister stoves, which are super nice. They're very costly, but they are very nice, and they're very efficient stoves too. If you're just out, and personally, I am a freezer bag type guy. So The only thing I need to do is boil water. That's it. I'm not cooking pasta, and I'm not doing all that. I have people out there trying to make like spaghetti on the trail. Just crazy.
I like coming across them so I can eat their stuff when they have too much left over. Exactly. I'm like, where's, the garlic bread too? You might as well. Right. If somebody's got their cast iron pan, they got stuff going in that, I'm hanging out with that too.
Right. So when it comes to the lighter options, like I said, personally, if I can boil 2 cups of water to hydrate my Mountain House meal or my homemade dehydrated freezer bag type meals, I'm totally fine. And nowadays with stoves, the BRS 3000 is one of the most popular, super stupid ultralight stoves out there. It weighs literally 0.9 ounces. It doesn't even weigh a whole ounce.
Wow.
So I'm a huge fan of that, but a lot of folks don't understand that that's not a workhorse of a stove. It's meant just to boil a cup of water, and that's about it. And it's not the most efficient thing out there, but it's cheap and it's extremely light. And if you're just boiling 1 cup or maybe 2 cups of water, it's really, really hard to beat. Now, if you want to move into something a little bit more durable than that super ultralight BRS stove, something like the MSR Pocket Rocket, which has been a favorite for, 15 years now.
Yeah, I hear a lot about that. And I've seen a lot of people carrying that one as well.
Yeah, definitely. And a very similar stove to that Pocket Rocket, and a personal favorite of mine is the Optimus Crux stove and the Crux Lite version of it. I just like it because it's always been a little bit lighter than the Pocket Rocket, but yet it still has the same wide base on it, and you can cook using a little bit larger pots. And then you can also, it's a more durable stove than that BRS is, so you can get kind of longer boiling times out of it. If you need to boil something for 3 or 4 minutes, you can do that.
Now, are most of those reliable, like in the summertime, like in good temperatures? I know in some experience, like I've had stoves that if it gets too cold at night, it's not going to light. Or if it's, too cold, then it takes forever to boil that. So talk about a little bit about the reliability of those particular stoves.
Sure. This is actually something that's right in my wheelhouse because I am a mountaineer by trade. So if you put me somewhere above 10,000 feet in sub-zero temperatures, I am right at home. And yeah, that does change up the game a little bit if you're going to be in colder weather or if you're going to be at altitude. There is a couple of different fuels that you can buy. Your fuel may be the issue.
Okay.
This whole time we have been talking about canister stoves, which you buy the little canisters of, isobutane. You can pick those up at Walmart or REI or just about anywhere. If you're going to be camping in super cold weather or at higher elevations, I definitely recommend using a white gas stove, which is not a canister stove. Much more efficient. They don't freeze up. They light every time. They are a little bit heavier, a little bit bulkier. But the trade-off here is that if you're camping in the snow, you don't have to carry water. You just boil
That's
snow.
True.
So you're not, you're actually saving weight when it comes right down to it. But the MSR Whisper Light is one of the most famous, I guess you'd call it solid fuel stove or not solid fuel stove. That's a whole different story. White gas. Yeah, we're going way too deep.
I was going to ask you. So the white gas, and I mean, where are people getting where are they picking up the white gas? Your local outfitter, that type of place?
There's a few different places you can get it, and here's a little cheat that every probably every section hiker already knows this one that already, uses it. You can stop in any gas station and pick up a can or a bottle of yellow heat. It's actually a automotive fuel additive.
Oh.
It's meant it keeps the water out of the gasoline in your car engine or in your car.
Okay.
When it's colder outside, because condensation forms in your gas tank. And so you put this additive in there, but it's the best fuel you can get as far as using for stoves. Basically, alcohol stoves is what we're talking about.
I got you. Okay.
But if you want to get truly technical with it, the MSR white gas can be found just about anywhere, and it's a high quality, highly amazing fuel.
Nice. So basically, we've gone from pots and pans to the jet boil, and I'm still carrying the jet boil. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I know. I don't know why, really. Just I guess because I'm just used to having it. To the BSR, the MSR, and now I know, and I've seen people out there with the cat stoves. So in their beer cans, they're making stoves out of their beer cans. So yeah. So
absolutely. And
using the what's it called, the Esbit tabs and things like that.
Yes, that's where
I'm really scared to get. Now I would carry Esbit for emergency, but as far as cooking, I mean, what's the reliability of that?
It's actually a halfway decent deal. I'm not a big fan personally. Actually, I was just on a hike here a couple of months ago. We hiked the Black Mountain Crest Trail up in North Carolina, and one of the guys with us busted out his Esbit stove, which that is a solid fuel stove. Now I can say it. That is a solid fuel stove.
Yeah.
Where it's basically, for those listening who don't know, it's basically like a 1 inch by 1 inch cube. It's kind of like it looks like a dice, and it's paraffin wax that burns pretty easily. And those are safe. Those are reliable. But they're not quick. They're not fast. They're not the most efficient things ever, that's for sure. And you also have to deal with the wind when you're dealing with that stuff too. So any weight that you might be saving as far as not carrying cans of fuel or not carrying a liquid fuel around with you,
right,
you're losing, because you have to take an actual windscreen with you or build yourself a little fort out of rocks and brush and whatnot, so you can get some kind of a windbreak thing going on.
And most people aren't doing that when they're out section. They're not doing that. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, and the time it took him to boil 1 cup of water.
You've already gone to bed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Seriously, we've already cooked and eaten, and we're halfway sleeping before he was done boiling 1 single cup of water. So yeah, I don't necessarily recommend those. I know it's kind of one of those things like you and your jet boil.
I know. Oh my God, you're gonna be laughing about that.
I will. Hey, to each their own.
Hey, hike your own hike, right?
Always.
I'm still trying to convince myself to buy one of those sleeping bags we talked about before. So not the mummy bag, but the quilt. I still haven't done it, but I'm almost there. Well,
I think I think we're going to be getting into that topic here more deeply in another episode.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at it right now. I just got a brand new one in for myself today, a new zero degree quilt. So I'm super excited to go find some of that cold weather above 10,000 feet.
That's why I got to stop talking to you, because the the pocketbook is just it's flying. So listen, I'm getting ready to ask you. You're going to answer our very first, the very first question I got via email from a listener, and we're going to get into our what I'm calling our Q&A segment with Steve. And the first question comes from Lindsay Pierce, and Lindsay wants to know. She's very curious about different gear considerations one might face when hiking as a couple. Do most people just have their own sets of sleeping bags or tents? Or is it easier to divvy it up and have one person carry a larger tent that would fit 2 people and one carry the 2 sleep systems, etc.? Or are there sleep systems that can even fit 2 people? So this is kind of a multi-question
loaded
within one. So I guess she's trying to figure out what her and her partner are trying to do as a couple, and do they carry the same stuff, or do they divvy it up? So you can break it down, Steve, however you want to answer that.
Sure. Let's start with the tent. Okay. A 2-person tent is always going to be, well, not always, but 9 times out of 10, a 2-person tent is going to be lighter than 2 1-person tents. So if that's the case, and a lot of times these days, especially with tents, and I know we kind of got into it before, these days, an ultralight backpacking 2-person tent, you really have to like the other person in that tent with you, because you're going to be sleeping on top of each other, which is not a bad thing if it's your boyfriend, girlfriend. Now, personally, when I go hiking with my girlfriend, which happens quite often, we backpack and we use a 2-person tent. And normally what happens, because I'm the guy, so I have to carry a little bit more weight than what she does. So this kind of
good for her. Good for her. Tell her that too. Good.
It's funny because she's an ox too. She's an athlete. She can carry anything, but that's just me being the nice guy, I guess. But anyways, a good trade off there is I have her carry the stove and the cooking system. So
that makes sense.
Right, because again, there's no sense in us carrying 2 different stoves with us if it's just we carry one stove that can boil enough water for 2 people, and I make her carry that, and I carry the tent, so it kind of evens out a little bit. And then of course, there is a lot of people, and again, it kind of depends on how you carry your gear too. Personally, I like to carry my tent poles on the outside of my pack. It's just easier for me. So that makes it easier for me to carry the poles and for her to carry the tent body. So I might carry the poles, the stakes, and the fly. And if we're really trying to even it out, which never happens, but let's just pretend. let's just pretend
it's going to even out. It's exactly. Not going to, but okay.
Right. And then as far as sleep systems, this gets a little bit tricky. And again, it all depends on really how much you like the person that you're with.
Right.
And this is another thing, and I love to say this because it's so fun. Cedar Ridge Outdoors, and I know that there are a couple of other companies who make them also. They actually make it's a 2-person quilt, but really what it is it's 2 1-person quilts that can be attached together, or they can be taken apart and used separately. And we jokingly, lovingly call this the baby maker system.
Or not the baby maker, right?
Right. Yeah, it just depends. And that's actually something that I tried out for the very first time this year. We were doing the Triple Crown up in Virginia, and it was stinking hot. It was like 90 degree days and 85 degree nights.
Oh, man, yeah.
And we took 2 40-degree quilts with us that were able to attach together. And it was a little bit overkill for the weather, but we did have an opportunity to get the basics out of the way. And we did realize that this is something that's really, truly going to work for us. We can snuggle if we want to, or we can separate those 2 quilts and kind of her on one side of the tent and me on the other. And we're back to back and we're just mad at each other because it was a bad day hiking. So,
or you've completely flipped around and her feet are at your head. And that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
It's just,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so how does that work? What if one sleeps warmer than the other? That kind of thing.
Well, and that's another option too. And that's something that we've actually looked into because I am a super, super hot sleeper and she's a super, super cold sleeper. So we were actually considering maybe I get a 20-degree quilt with that baby maker attachment system that can be attached to a 0-degree quilt for her for when we're out during the wintertime. So yeah, you can have 2 different temperature ratings of quilts that attach together, which is really neat. Now, the other side of this would be a double sleeping bag, which is incredibly heavy. And no matter who you go with, I mean, sleeping bags are just heavy, period. And again, I know we're going to talk about quilts later on in this podcast thingy here in another few episodes, but I was the absolute toughest convert to come from sleeping bags to quilts. But once I finally switched over, holy cow, I will just never go back. Once I realized how much dead weight I was carrying with me. And yeah, a 2-person sleeping bag, especially for colder weather, I mean, you could be looking at 6, 7, 8, 9 pounds easily. And that is just a ton of weight. So I definitely recommend staying away.
And that's a ton for you to carry because we know that in your deal that you would be carrying the weight. So, so really the weight consideration as a couple is always, you do really want to even it out and things like that. So it seems like, you gave the answer as, as a couple what to do, but there's also, couples out there that hike, together, but, they do completely sleep separate and things like that because otherwise they wouldn't get any sleep.
Right. Yep, definitely. And I mean, when that happens, then maybe it is a better idea for everyone to just do their own separate thing, carry your own tent, carry your own sleeping system, carry your own whatever. And I mean, another thing that I think really needs to be talked about because it's one of the heaviest items that we all carry, but we never add it up when it comes to how much weight are we carrying is food. And again, I make her carry all of the food. So that takes a few pounds.
I see how this is going down.
Well, that's right, because I end up with extra pairs of shoes and all kinds of girly stuff, and I mean, So, but that is one of those ways, the food that you can use to kind of even things out a little bit. So if I am carrying an extra few pounds in a tent and an extra sleeping system, I'll make her carry the stove and the food.
All right, very good. Hey, Lindsay, I've actually got some backpacking gear flea market stickers I'm going to send you because you were the first question that we answered on the podcast. And thanks again, Steve, for chatting with us. We want to continue to have Steve answer some of your gear questions on the podcast. So if you have questions, please send them to me via email at jesternc2212@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Wells Fargo presents one of the surest ways to grow your money, a Wells Fargo CD account, where you can earn a 5.00% annual percentage yield on an 11-month term with a minimum opening deposit of $5,000. Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/CD rates to open a CD account and start growing your savings with us.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.